to order. Tonight, we wanted to, and hopefully, the plan is to wrap up the budget discussions and then bring the budget forward for our June meeting to then officially vote on. So tonight is really trying to get at if you have burning areas that you want to address, to change, to modify, please raise them now. It would be much easier. We're not obviously voting, but if there seems to be consensus, that gives the city staff a little bit of guidance on what to bring forward to present to the council. We are able to make changes during the June meeting in the moment if there are things as we vote when it comes to that. So there'll be that opportunity as well. But tonight is really to try to get at those areas that we feel like we should take a closer look at or make some changes. So I don't know if you have anything you want to present, or
well, I guess not necessarily present, but what you've all been provided a copy of in paper and also in email are the face sheets as requested at the last meeting, with all of the documented changes and recommended changes that we've had thus far, including the highlights being the rec and social service agencies in this sheet you have are budgeted at last year's figures. So that's still a kind of a question that needs to be resolved. And that's really I think the biggest outstanding question from the city's perspective anyway at this point is what we want to do with those budget items.
So we just got underway, nothing has happened. We haven't changed anything. You have been appointed to 3 more committees.
Mercy.
So I'll kick it off in terms of just the social service budget. I think we should, at best case scenario, is to leave it at last year's levels, not the increase. But I also want to raise the question in terms of just the allocation of dollars, and one of the large ones, I fully support the allocation to the Y. I think the Y steps in and does a lot in terms of providing recreational opportunities for residents. For me, it's that connecting the dots and being sure that it's really meeting that goal and making sure that the residents have access to it. I'm not sure that just having the weekend access really accomplishes that. And we have asked in the past, over many years, to have more of a report out, which just has never materialized on a consistent basis. We'd get a report and then it would disappear. And the presentation that we had really was all over the place in terms of where the dollars actually go. So for me, if we're going to allocate, it's 62,000, I think, that amount, I would just like to have it more designated specifically for recreational activities, opportunities. If you look at being able to extend it so that more citizens have access to the facilities and on a regular basis. So that's one thing that I would raise.
So I did submit a request this year through the Rec Commission. You're still talking about the Y, or in general?
Yeah, the Y, the difference, not the portion like I think it's out of the rec budget. The Y is paid directly, separate from that 62,000 to set up the ice rink and some of those activities. This is the ask of the 62,000, which is more just general, and it's it seems more global, and you can't pin down the numbers to supporting Ellsworth residents. And I just, whether it's tied to memberships or that certain scholarships would be given, that $62,000 would be used for scholarships, memberships, so that it can be tracked. I think the money should go there. I think it's important for the community to have. I would just like to see greater access, so that it can be advertised too, so that Ellsworth residents know it's a resource that they can use, and that if they needed support for membership, that there was a way to get that, they could go to the Y. I just don't think that has been widely utilized that way, and so I don't think the advantage of accessing the Y is there for the residents, because it becomes more of a general fund operations versus access to the resources.
So I will just add to that they did submit a request for $70,000, but it was more than a week late, and that was after several grace periods with the Recreation Commission, which is why we left it at 62. The rec chose to leave it at last year's amount.
Their directors switched this year though as well? Or?
Yes.
They don't have a director yet, do they?
I don't believe that they
Yeah.
did when they did this, but someone stepped up and
They
drafted
have an
the
interim
request.
person, I think.
I
Just-
have a question. Are you done with that?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. The Ellsworth Harbor, so you only have $300 in revenue for the harbor gas? So I'm assuming you're netting that, but on the Ellsworth Harbor page, it has the fuel expense, the revenue, the fuel on hand, and so the net revenue shows at $15,418. Which actually sounds much more realistic than a net of $300.
Where do you see the $300?
And under revenue
Oh,
for harbor gas, it has $300.
yeah.
But I think that, I think they're netting that,
I think that's what I did. Yeah.
but I'm not sure, I haven't seen what it looks like, but it really should be so that there's a realistic, a true value is to look at, to budget expense and then budget revenue.
Yeah, I can put the 15,000 on the revenue sheet.
Yeah, because if that's, and that looks
Yeah.
like that would be the net.
Yep.
Thank you.
Is it, that's the
Mine-
waiting
but
fee or the gas we're talking about?
The gas.
Mine
gas
says
fuel.
60,000.
On the harbor page, there's like a little thing below
Mine
where I
says-
put,
Isn't that the resident stickers?
So.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I need a ruler.
Yeah, so
You have it, 16.
Oh, okay.
I apologize.
You're just trying to make sure we're all awake.
it's hard to see these lines.
I need a ruler so I can see the lines underneath.
So you just netted it then? and
Yeah,
did-
she netted it, yeah.
Can I throw something out there? Yeah. I get it.
Yeah, okay. I just want
You know the rules.
Well, I didn't know if it was public proceeding.
It's fun.
It's about the budget, right?
Yes. Might be something added for next year, not this year, though. Gordon Workman, Ellsworth, Maine, resident. In the past few years, I've been called upon for animal control stuff. I stopped doing it for a while. I've been called on again by Woodlawn Museum to see if I can do something about a dog that's been running since March. I know they've been doing some actions trying to take care of this issue. They've only set the trap once since March. I tried to explain to the people what they had to do. I called up the animal control officer at whoever's on duty. We really don't have an animal control officer per se. We really don't have a facility per se, or the equipment per se. I think something that we might want to look to in the future to put on hand, unless, of course, you get into the Hancock Commissioners the commissioners now have one that served a lot of commission, unless you get into that rotation. But I think us being a city, if we're going to have an animal control officer, maybe we should have a full-time in a facility, if that's possible somehow. Not this year, of course, but, you know, in the future, because I get these phone calls. So, anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out, that,
All in favor of appointing Gordon Workman as our animal?
no.
I thought that's what you were after.
No.
That's
No.
what I heard.
No. I get volunteered for that, so.
Thank you.
Yeah. Before I come down.
Well, we'll continue with that stipend then.
Yeah.
Volunteer.
Thank you.
See you.
See ya. Does the police play a part in that, or fire?
Yes, police are animal control, and we have a catch pole, and we have kennels, and we have contract with the small animal clinic to take the stray animals there, so. And we have been involved with trying to catch that dog.
I've heard a lot about it.
And the owner doesn't want us trying to catch the dog, so it's
Whose dog is it?
That sounds like a mess.
a woman who lives next to Woodlawn. But totally off topic, so.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
I'm just looking, kind of picking at random, because it's coming through the rec commission, but the Ellsworth Community Music Institute, the way they present funds requested, purpose of funds, here's our specific concert series, I'm just generalizing, but they have all of these numbers between 500, 700 residents, 70 to 100 people at each event who are Ellsworth residents reached. Here's how they support recreational activities within the community. This seems to me like a perfect report of here's our programs over the last couple of years, here's how much we need, because they directly go to programs that directly service Ellsworth people. Is that kind of the thing that you'd like to see from the Y?
Yeah, I just think we give a lot to the Y.
Yeah.
And I think, I've supported it and I continue to support it because we don't have a recreation department. I think there's a great need for those types of activities to be able to utilize the facilities. My concern is I just don't think it's tied close enough to the community in terms of Ellsworth residents being able to then publicize it to say, here, if you meet these circumstances, you can go and use the Y, and just having the weekend access, to me, isn't sufficient. I understand that they present numbers in terms of individuals who, they've, access to the camps and things like that. That would be a good fit. I just would like it to be more specific, and that we hold them, if they're going to receive it, accountable to presenting that, because I do think we have the accountability to the community around, especially when it's that significant in support.
Yeah, we have to justify it. We need the data and the numbers to do it.
I can work with the rec commission, with Matt, to make a standard form for those. We have one, but I know some use their own letterhead, and we make it clear next year that you have to use the city's form because it has specific data that we're looking for.
And my guess is why would be open to that. I don't think they're opposed to it. It's a matter of just being clearer and then having the accountability. If the rec commission were the ones to receive that report and then report back to the council, that might be an even better way to connect the dots.
And it would be similar to the form that's in the social services one.
Right.
That is very specific about how many
And if
Ellsworth
they want to
residents.
submit an additional letter or other supporting documents, they certainly can, like Heart of Ellsworth does, but the city's form would be a required document in order to be vetted through the rec commission.
Hey, Tony, so the employee COLA raises, it's a lot. Does that include like police, fire.
No, those are all just, those are union, so those are in their departmental budgets.
Just 122, 400 seems like. When, in 2022, it was only 36,700. I looked in the book here, and it's.
Jimmy, were you looking?
It's under employee benefits, it's in the admin, it's like page 10 or,
That hasn't changed, right?
190.
Cost of living.
Yeah, so. So it was 108 in our book, it just seems like it's really high.
So that includes, all of our admin staff here at City Hall. It does include admin staff of the police and fire departments that are not in the union. And then it does include the water department and the wastewater superintendent.
Okay, so that needs to come out of there, because those should be in the water and wastewater.
Okay,
Library's in there too, right? Didn't we go through that?
yes.
Oh, yeah,
Which
so
it
the
wouldn't
library.
have been previously. Probably, it wouldn't have been in
Yeah, I
here
don't think it-
previously, it would have been in the
I
library
think
budget.
last year Amy had it in the library budget.
So it's in,
It's in this.
okay,
It's in
and that's fine,
122,
okay.
250.
So that's in there twice then, the library is.
I think they took it out of the libraries.
That was the discussion the last time the
Yes.
library presented, was to move that into here and take it out of the library special.
Did they?
I didn't I thought we decided
thought
it was the other way around, that we were
Yeah.
gonna leave it in the library and then next year consider separate. I mean, maybe
I
I'm not
think so,
remembering
too.
that right, but that was how I remembered that conversation going.
It was both ways.
Because
Well, I
it
mean,
was-
that would bring
Library.
the, just having the water and
No, we're all
wastewater
right.
removed will reduce the mill rate.
Where's the library? God, I can't find anything else.
It's about 2 pages from there.
In the new one.
Yeah, it is 2 pages forward
I
from
need
where
my
you just were.
calculator.
Seriously.
My cheap one doesn't work. Really? It doesn't go into the high enough numbers.
Oh, yeah. You have to do your phone and turn it sideways. She taught me
I don't
that.
see a
that's what she said.
COLA in the library budget.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'll double check it, but I'm quite certain we included it in the general employee benefits line.
In fact, their insurance, health insurance,
Right.
and HRA have been removed as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So is there social security in there?
It's in their payroll, yes.
It's in their payroll.
Yep.
There's something wrong with those numbers.
So, just a question in terms of understanding, why are the employee benefits being separated out from the specific departments in terms of tying it back to people? Because when you do it this way, you can't tell what the per employee cost is. You can't look at it and say, okay, over here, we anticipate it costing this amount. Lumping it all in means that whatever that number is a number that gets approved kind of in total, which is unrelated to all those specific departments. So I guess I'm just not clear why we wouldn't want to have that tied specifically to. If all these benefits are on average, I'm making it up 22%, then that should be applied to each of the departments so that we get a full sense of what it costs to operate different areas of the city. And I'm not suggesting we need to do it this year, just
We-
a thought going forward.
We haven't done it that way in the past. The department the city departments are all, the benefits are all figured into that city employee section. The library was separated out, and I don't know why or who started that, but that's just the way we got it from the library. Amy had it broken down. Water and wastewater, of course, they separated out because of the enterprise accounts, but the rest of the city has always just fallen under one, one large group. But that's not to say that we can't divide it out per department to give you a true cost of what each department and its personnel cost, as opposed to it all being grouped into the, city as a whole.
Yeah, and I have no desire for that work to be done this year. I think it's far enough in the process. I just wanted to raise it as I just think it's a clearer picture. It's better, it's
Yeah.
easier to understand, I think, but look at that. You can do the apples to apples comparison.
And I think because the other city departments hadn't done that, I think that's what kind of sponsored the change in the library.
Yeah.
But to your point, I think it may be more appropriate to break it out for all departments and have all departments follow that standard rather than reduce the standard of the library to what has been done in the past with the other city departments.
It was one of those things that's the way it was always done. It was considered its own cost center, so, and it had, it's kind of in its own department. So. Do you know why, I mean, that's the way we kind of did it forever, Michelle. Do you know any reasons?
No, because it was just admin.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just city hall admin.
Right, it wasn't,
Yeah. And the library is, I mean, if you look at the charter, I do have concerns about pulling that out, and I know that we had that discussion, but I thought it stayed the other way around, is the library is run by a board of trustees, and they have full control over their budget and full control over their personnel and the benefits that they get. They used to have a employee association, I guess they don't anymore.
No, they still do.
They still do.
They do?
Yeah.
So they have the possibility of having different benefits than the rest of the city. So it's always been that has stayed in, because they also are allowed to have their fund balance, and they're also allowed to raise their own money, which no other department has. They're completely separate. They're a department of the city, but they're separate in the way that they operate. So, I mean, I wouldn't want to change their budget, the amount of money we're appropriating to them, but I do think that it needs to be shown as the way that it is in the charter, because they do have a bit of autonomy to how they work versus the rest of the city. So,
But I thought we figured out that they don't get to keep their fund balance anymore.
well, that's a discussion that we have to have, but they almost kind of have to, because they have the ability to raise funds separately, not just in grants and things like that, but they also have the ability to raise capital funds specifically for the library that don't have to be for a specific project, which no other department has the ability to do. So if they do that, and then they're in with our general fund and then not separated and have their own fund balance or special fund balance as it used to be, then that money could inadvertently go someplace that the donors didn't designate. It goes to the library. It doesn't mean they have to designate to a specific project in the library, but it can go for the library. So that's the reason why it's always been separated. Benefits, full cost of the library.
And why the fund balance shouldn't come back to the council.
Yeah.
Well,
Right, like it needed to either be all one way or all the other way,
Right.
is what I remembered from that
And-
conversation.
Exactly,
Well-
exactly, and,
There's a difference between donations and fund balance. Donations may be a part of the fund balance, but the city appropriation in terms of the taxpayers' contribution, that if positions aren't filled and there's a fund balance because of that, that was what several years ago was the discussion in terms of that should go back to the city for allocation back in terms of designated, could go back to it comes to the council for where do you want the fund balance to go? And that's different than a specific donation. So I agree with you on the one hand in terms of if somebody's donating to the library, that's a restricted donation. If the result of the fund balance, they receive $20,000 of donations and they have a fund balance of $80,000, well, $60,000 of that was generated because they underspent the budget that was approved. That's a city expense and should go back.
It is, and the council still has full control over it. I mean, they can't use it. They can't use that fund balance without coming to the council and asking for permission. So the city council still has full control over that fund balance, but it's just kept separate because the trustees have control over their budget and their spending and their employees and what they ask for. So it already has a board oversight. So, I mean, we did do it that way, because they do work to raise their own funds. They do get a lot of grants, which we take care of, and aren't included in here at all. But, it also is the way, if they do decide to give higher benefits, it's here. And it's in their budget, and it's an increase. So that also shows. So it's a I guess it's a double-edged sword, but. And as far as keeping the fund balance, if they have a fund balance of $60,000 and we can use it instead of putting it in our budget in the next year for one of their capital improvements, it's just, at least we know that's where it went, right?
Well, it's encumbered. That's the part that we haven't done in the last few years.
It also makes these numbers look wonky. To say, when you're looking at year-to-year budget, it looks like, it doesn't look accurate.
And again, we've talked about this enough. That's difficult this year, but getting a budget and being able to compare it to prior year, what was actually spent.
Actually spent, yeah, the actual.
Is more relevant than looking budget to budget to budget. Because a budget is just, it's a number, it's the wish list and what you spend. And also, to that, it's also what you spent, but also hearing from the department directors of saying, and we needed more. We didn't have enough, if
Right.
that's the case. But it's a better comparison than trying to compare budget to budget.
Absolutely is.
I think we're seeing that with some of the employee benefits, because last year before especially with the departments with the union contracts, that was something that wasn't in place. So
Yeah.
we're seeing a big change there.
And having that all in one lump sum, it's really hard as far as the employee raises. Does everybody just across the board get the same exact, no matter what department they're in? If it's the library, which has the right to give more, is it admin? Does everybody just get a straight across the board, or, I mean, how does that work? Because we lump it into one.
What is the COLA?
5%.
5% is what's in there.
And our payrolls, because I know that some people have been paid extra for working multiple positions. Are those back to normal, or are we just continuing on?
Those are back to normal.
Those are back to normal.
So, removing the water and the wastewater, putting those in their departments. Library and city COLAs reduce the estimated mill rate from 17.5 to 17.49. That's a small change.
Woo-hoo.
So I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand. Is that number correct that's in there? Or are there some things in there that aren't supposed to
It was
be?
reduced a little bit from like 122,000 to 104.
Okay.
And that's going to the enterprise accounts.
Right. Which don't affect the mill rate, so.
So in this packet, it says 122, but it's actually 104. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Very quiet.
I got airplanes landing.
Can we go back to the outside organizations? Just because what looks like our final draft here has them back to last year's numbers.
Are you on the section 8 or the recreation side of the outside agencies?
I'm on section 8,
Okay.
and just comparing it from our original binder that we had, where the entirety of the ask was just over 80,000. And what we're looking with on our newest draft is a 3.9% year-over-year change,
Mhm.
back to 36,250.
Because she's put everything back.
Everything, I flat
It's
funded
outside
everything.
organizations, she just put everything.
As it was last year.
Section 8, I like that means.
I had a couple questions about, well, section 8 in the book. What page?
It's about midway
here?
through your,
I just can't find it here.
It's after traffic signals and streetlights, so if you get there, you're getting close. I had Nick, do you have a question?
I'm still formulating.
I'm just looking at this new one and the old one, we had taken Friends in Action Operating out of whatever that top line was.
Administrative.
Administrative, because they're down below also, Friends in Action, Friends in Action.
yes.
Those aren't
Did
two
we-
separate accounts, operating and services, or are they supposed to be one?
And I
the
see you
same?
put them the same as they were
The same as they were last year.
last year.
Your
but-
total request for this year was $10,000, which was originally in that top section.
Yeah,
And then, so I made them the same as last year, which is a total of $6,200. And I only formatted it the way that it was last year, just because that was the direction that I thought the council was leaning.
yeah.
Was that because?
I didn't really think that we would jump from spending somewhere around 3,500 to 35,000 to 80,000 in 1 year. I feel, to me, the Chamber of Commerce, the Heart of Ellsworth, and maybe the Union River Center for Innovation, although maybe that's a little bit different, they feel very similar to me. So it has not made sense to me that we give the Chamber of Commerce $10,000 and we give Heart of Ellsworth $2,800. Heart of Ellsworth brought in almost $300,000 in grants, just in grants, not counting the other stuff they do, in just 1 year. To me, that just seems like however we jigger everything else, it makes sense to at least increase them back to the $5,000 we used to give them, just because they give back so much more than what we give them.
I would agree with that.
I'm in favor of that.
And also, I'm hoping, if as part of the strategic plan for the Main Street America,
Yeah.
that we'll also be providing some TIF funds on top of that.
On top of that.
On top of that, yep.
And just what I would add to that is kind of the same theme as the why, and which I think has happened, so I want to say that, is that greater connection working with the city versus being separate from the city, that there has to be that coordination. And I think there's been a vast improvement over the 6 years that I've been on the council in terms of that relationship. So I think that needs to continue in terms of recognizing that that's what we want to have happen. And if we're giving that kind of funding, and that goes with the chamber, that goes with all of the groups that we fund, that accountability has to be there to show the benefit to the community. And if it's not there, then there really should be a question about whether we should be giving those dollars to whatever the organization is.
Here's our programs, here's the people, here's proof that they're from Ellsworth, live in Ellsworth, here.
And planning, in terms of if there's a plan, we should be working in the same direction, not in isolated pockets.
Can we require these, or maybe year over year, appropriations be contingent upon a report, like a mid-year report by these organizations? We'll fund you again next year if and only if you've come at some point during the year to present to council about the use of these appropriations.
Yeah, I think the community report, even whether it's presented to the council, put on a report that's put on the website, combination, there should be that accountability. And Councilor O'Halloran, you talk about the fact of that taking taxpayers' dollars and giving it to organizations, there should be some accountability to that. And report back so the community knows. If that's going to happen, then provide the information, not just when there's a budget meeting, and you put it on a piece of paper. There should be some responsibility. And I think all of these groups would be more than happy to do that, to talk about what they're doing.
I would like to say that, you look through these groups and you'd like to support everybody. But I struggle, again, to repeat that, I struggle with taxing Joe to give to an organization that Joe may not approve of. That I'm cautious of that. But when you look down through those, they're all valuable things for the city. So it's a hard, especially the ones that are avoiding costs that we can't see, like the Y, for example. Ellsworth doesn't have a pool at the high school. We're not staffing that. And so are we avoiding a whole nother layer of government by supporting the Y? I think really that's what it comes down to. And same with the heart of Ellsworth. And you could have that argument for everyone that wants money. So it's a hard thing to digest, no matter what side of that equation you're on.
So Councilor Hanson, what was your proposal? Just so.
To increase to $5,000, the heart of Ellsworth.
So the total would be 10? That's what he said.
No, the total would be 5,000. It's listed 2,850 now.
Oh,
So I'm
because
just saying it really should be 5. I mean, 10,000, it should be 10,000, but,
isn't it listed below? Or not?
they asked for 10,000 in the new updated one. We have them at
Okay,
2,850, which is what we gave them last year. And so I was just saying it should be at
Okay.
least 10,000. What I actually think is, or I mean, it should be at least 5,000. I actually think it should be 10,000. I would vote for 10,000.
So can I just go over a couple of things? So they asked for the affiliate community program dues for $550, which I think that we could definitely help with that, especially as we move forward with it helping them, or all of us becoming like a Main Street community. The beautification is really for everybody. That's $2,500. Meet the Candidates, which is definitely specifically for the City of Ellsworth candidates. That's $1,200. And then the Franklin Street free concert series is $4,000. So that total is $8,250. I'd be in favor of that.
Of 8,250.
Are they doing the concert series this
Are
year?
you definitely gonna do those concert series, Cara, this year?
We'd like to.
If they have money for it.
I'm sorry.
If you have money from us.
Yeah, we have one scheduled already, and we're looking at doing 2 more. And if the city was willing to fund one, we would definitely be able to do the second. And we have funding asks out with sponsors, and we have a few grants we're waiting for back. So it's kind of looking more like a end of summer, because the first one will be the 31st of August, and a fall concert series. And tomorrow we have a meeting with the Grand to see if we can partner with them for an inside spot.
I like the idea of fall too, because we get so much going on in the summer, and
Yeah.
then it all just ends.
Especially in the
So
shoulder
that's a great idea.
seasons.
Yeah.
Are you suggesting you want some of the grant's money?
Oh, no. No. The pie gets bigger.
I just want
as more
I just
people
want
come to the city.
I want to see how fast he gets you.
He's upstairs, he is upstairs.
So, I would like to make the recommendation that in each of these different areas that the Heart of Ellsworth would request the funds at the time that they need them. We're not just gonna write a check for $8,250, it'd be broken up. So if their concert series wasn't done, then
They
we
get
would not be
reimbursed.
give the
So it's a
4,000.
reimbursement.
Bingo, yeah.
Yeah, so you're saying keep it in the budget as what they want and reimburse them for the things as they happen.
Yeah. I just think we're making really great strides of getting rid of those silos and us all working together and wanted to show support. That's me personally. I'm just
Okay, agreed.
But if we do that, so they've asked us for 10,000 and they've listed $10,000 worth of stuff they want to do, then they are forced to do this stuff we want them to do with our money, which I guess is
And we're
fine.
thinking about it in terms of paying for services rather than donating, which I think is
Yeah.
a good way to think of a lot of these organizations. It's-
Yeah.
This is what we're giving to
Yep,
the citizens.
that sounds fine.
So what number are we recommending? Is it
8250.
10
Tony's
or
doing it.
8250?
I have it in as 8250.
Just because there's one in there for small business support, but I think we provide really good small
Yeah,
business
so that-
support here. So that's why I kind of took it out.
We do, and the chamber does that
Yeah.
too.
So
It's a duplicate.
I'm in favor of 8250.
So, and just remember, because I want to make sure the community knows, these are recommendations in
Yes.
terms of just trying to see if this consensus, that will go in based on what we think we're hearing. But the vote will take place in June. The community can weigh in on that, and that's when we'll ultimately decide. And I only say that because I don't want anybody to think that we're not negotiating, we're not voting, we're just trying to get a sense of where everybody stands with this.
We just need to give direction to
Right,
Tony,
exactly.
so-
Right, there has to be, that's the consensus,
Yeah.
but it could change when we ultimately vote.
Absolutely.
I don't like being the man behind the curtain.
That's right. Awesome.
Do you want to just go down through this list, or do you want to just, as you all have one that you want to pick that out?
There's only, like 5 that requested increases that, over last year.
Yeah.
There's the WIC, the Friends in Action, the Emmaus Homeless Shelter, Community Partners, Lobsterman Association.
And
And
you'll
there's some
see
other smaller increases.
Everybody Eats and Families First is not listed this year,
Okay.
because they did not request, so I did not just automatically fund them at the same levels as last year. They did not request funding.
Thank you. The only other thing I would say is, if we're giving to Downey's Community Partners, can we put the caveat that that's for their heating fuel fund, so they don't come back to us in the wintertime asking for more,
I agree.
for Ellsworth residents?
And would you want the same recommendation that Tammy had for Heart of Ellsworth, that we pay that only after, or at the start of the heating season?
So it's encumbered until.
Yeah, it's encumbered until they have their fundraiser there, and then that'll
Yeah.
go to them.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a good idea.
And are we still, like with the Y, we used to, July 1st came around and we'd issue them a check. So, we did make it, in
Half and
years
half.
past, it's half and half when taxes come in, so like September
Yes.
would be
And it was
31.
last year
Okay,
also.
all right.
So, do we want to, in the future, if we're saying we specifically want to be able to say as a city where the money is going for all these organizations? Like, do you want to say that for every single organization, that we reimburse them once they do whatever it is we've said we're going to pay for? Like, why just those 2 organizations and not all of them?
if I can answer that one. So the WIC program, I mean, we can't. It's really a donation, but as far as, like, this is not gonna be popular, but there are some organizations that they don't pay, they have facilities in the city of Ellsworth and they pay nothing for taxes. Right? So that's really our donation, and they don't give anything for payment in lieu of taxes. So, and for some of these organizations, it's a lot of money. It's a huge value. So,
So who is that?
McDonough's Community Partners, that property they have on the Bucksport Road. So, and not saying that they shouldn't be there, and not saying that that's not a worthwhile organization, but, you
Are
know,
there other ones that fall in that category?
I don't know if Loaves
well,
and Fishes falls in that.
Northern Light, but we're not giving them any money.
Why do we give Northern Light a building without?
Because they're a nonprofit.
Because they don't pay taxes.
They don't pay taxes.
There are some, like Jack's does give payment in lieu of
They
taxes.
do, yep. And some, I don't know, I'd have
They
to,
give
I'd
a
have to go through
donation.
it.
It's not open. Call it a
For a
pilot.
couple of years, it was
It's a lot.
equal to the amount they would have owed if they were a for-profit. And
it's
then it
six
dipped down a
figures.
little bit, but.
How much?
I would have to go back and look.
It's 53,000.
That's Jackson Lab.
Jackson.
So one thing I would say in terms of the difference in terms of the social service budget, which is down below,
Yeah.
that's more of kind of services that, the way I look at it, are things that are valuable to citizens that kind of, we know what they do, Loaves and Fishes, we know what they're doing. It's, the ones up top, and we talked about this, I think, several times, is that's more of what groups in the city do we want to partner with to accomplish certain tasks? And
Right,
it's
that's
that.
like more bang for our buck.
Right, and that's more of, this is what we want done together, and we're gonna pay you for that. The social service ones are more,
You're helping our
here, you're helping the
citizens.
citizens, and here's the donation for that. And then the recreation, the only one that I'm saying doesn't carve out is, again, is kind of along the same line as the top line, is here's what we need from you. And so the dollars go to a specific
Maintain
function.
our fields, for
Yeah.
example, set up the ice rink.
That's how I look at it, so.
I think that's reasonable.
But hopefully next year we'll have an application that people fill out, and we'll have a better idea, especially in the social services, of what the additional money that they need, because some of them have, quite a bit of governmental income. And, and some of them just need a donation, a small donation, in order to get a matching grant. So there's a lot of different reasons why we give them, funding, especially the social services. But there are some, the application, I don't know, I think you sent it to us, and we asked those questions. How much do you receive in governmental funding? What is the percentage of your revenue that goes to administrative costs? Things like that,
Right.
to get a good idea of what we're giving to. And then we used to take into consideration whether or not they have real estate in the city of Ellsworth and add that value to what we're giving.
Yep.
And then Downey's Community Partners, they do take care of a lot of people, but that's a two-county organization.
Yep. Yeah, no, I was more wondering if we're gonna we either tell people this is how much we're giving you this year, here it is, or we'll give it to you once you report back to us. So I was just looking for kind of clarity about
Yeah.
that
How would you break that out
piece.
for
Like,
Emmaus?
how would you decide the Emmaus Center versus
Yeah.
Downey's
And that's
Community?
why it can't be a broad stroke solution on that.
But if all of that stuff, that doesn't help us this year, but if all of that information is
Exactly.
in there next year, then it just makes a little bit more sense when we try to make these decisions.
Well, we'll talk about that in December.
Let's remember that for December. Let's remember that for
I'll
December.
come back remind you.
Don't look for me.
That's not funny. That's not funny.
Michelle, you said for WIC, it would be hard to tease out what is for Ellsworth residents and what's not.
Yeah, because it's a, I mean, WIC is women, infant, and children, and they provide services. Although I think they've broadened it, it's not just women, infant, and children, is it? They used to provide diapers and formula and educational service, you know, certain very specific things, but I think it's broadened now.
But that response is exactly what I think is lacking.
Exactly.
Is if we're giving out taxpayer dollars, we should really understand, and it's up to the organizations who are asking for it to say, this is what we're going to use these dollars for. This is how it benefits the
Exactly.
citizens. And sometimes that's mixed and it's not as straight line as you would like, but if you're giving $1,000 and they can show that it's serving 1,000 families who are Ellsworth residents, you can say, okay, that makes sense, and you see their budget, but we've been lacking that, and it's more been, these are the groups that asked, and this is the dollar amount that they've been getting for year after year.
And then they have to come to the council too and make their request.
This application, this was for fiscal year '22, number of Ellsworth residents served 229. I don't see one for FY '24 though.
It probably is 24, and it just didn't put a rate date on it. That's what I would guess, if they gave it to us.
So there's some way, or at least they did in '22, have some way to figure out which were the Ellsworth residents. But it's also,
All of these say 22. I think it's just what the,
Well, the application.
I think the
didn't get
application
Never changed the date on it.
says 22 on it.
And I would like to see next year what the tax benefit that they're receiving. I think we talked about that last time, did we? Like, just show what
The real estate?
their real
Yeah.
estate, the assessment is, and what the current tax rate is. And whether or not if they give a pilot.
Anything else with the social services groups?
I mean, I would, it's hard to tease out the exact services and the exact cost per services, but I would like to see some of those, you know, the homeless shelter, WIC increase at least in line with the rest of, you know, that 3.9%, because everything is more expensive for everybody. They're serving more people, things cost more. They're requesting way above that amount, but when it gets hazy and it gets difficult to say what exact programs, how many people exactly are you serving. But when they say the need has, you know, increased exponentially, it's a sort of bare minimum of.
It's sort of funny, like this.
You know, at least we're covering for inflation, or barely.
Yeah, I just think this number is not actually even right, because we did give them 2850 last year, not 0. Anyways.
So the percentage is off a bit.
So basically, other than,
Is that for the Heart of Ellsworth?
yeah.
Because last year that fell on the recreation in section 10.
Yeah.
And so we moved it this year to make it easier for us.
Yeah. Yeah, so this.
So that
as
is
it-
gonna kind of inflate this percentage a little bit.
Right, so this, as it is written right now, other than changing Heart of Ellsworth, every other organization is exactly the same as they were last year.
Correct.
Correct.
And I think, for me, given that we've been talking about the process, and we don't have a great process, and we want to improve it, I think it's appropriate to flat fund those requests, because what we don't know is, did some of those organizations, are they serving more people? Or are they restricted in terms of their capacity is X and they're only serving the same number as before? Did they get a change in reimbursement, funding? We don't have answers to those questions, and So I wouldn't be comfortable just increasing those line items. I think flat funding it with the understanding that there's going to be a different process going forward, which would provide the information that make more of an informed decision going forward. That's how I feel about it.
So part of the application should have a section of describe the increase, why?
Yeah.
Is it
Yeah.
greater capacity, higher costs?
Yeah.
Then application or no application, I mean, these are all great questions that should be posed to the representatives from the organizations when they're here during their budget workshop, because
Absolutely.
they may have been able to provide you with
That's right.
many of this, much of this information without actually putting it in any application, so I would just recommend that we don't rely solely on an application process, that we actually engage them when they're here with quality questions to get information out of them.
And so what we're saying for outside organizations, that we want them to come here and present to us, but all the organizations that the rec committee suggested, we're letting them vet that first and then bring that here.
Mhm.
Is that right? Including the YMCA? Or does the YMCA, do you think that should fit in a totally different category and they should come here?
Me personally, I think the rec commission should vet that. I just think there should be the accountability for that. And so if the council has some guidance for the rec commission to provide that in terms of what you're looking for, I think when we have commissions and we have people who are volunteering their time and we're asking them to be a part of that, that they should also have that ability to make those strong recommendations. Ultimately, the council makes that decision, but I'm very much in favor of when we're asking citizens to devote their time, that they should also have that accountability authority to participate in the budgeting process.
And at one point, we did have a social services committee that did all the vetting
Yeah.
on these.
Yeah, that ended up being changed because we were doing it twice. Social service would meet with, the committee would meet with the entities, and then
People
the
still had to ask
council
all
wanted,
this.
the council wanted them to come into the council, and it became redundant, so.
Because it was, if they could come, if the social services committee cut them at all, they could come to the council and ask to appeal the decision, I guess.
So
Not
it's a
everybody
consideration.
can. Yeah.
John likes committee.
Well, I guess we'll figure that out next
Yeah.
fall.
Get some thinking to do this coming fall.
But even a mid-year, winter presentation from some of these would at least, we will have heard of them and understood their programs by the time we get to budget season next year.
I think it also gets their programs out to the public too, and then,
Yeah.
not just us, but to the entire public.
That might be a good thing to think about at the communications committee too.
Steve, you're so quiet.
All right, other
Oh, I'm ready to explode.
other parts of the budget.
Don't explode, do it in little pieces.
Let off a little steam at a time.
Yeah. Goodness.
Other parts of the budget? Pat?
Go ahead, but don't explode.
That's fair.
I'd just like to speak in general. There's a lot of great things that is in this budget. However, I'd just like to throw out the fact that every page has the opportunity for emotional decisions, and I've talked about this before. And at some point, we've got to get back to strict financial decisions. I would love to see every one of these organizations get more money evenly distributed. However, and departments, I'm sure departments have made many cuts. But at the end of the day, we've got to send this bill to Mr. and Mrs. Taxpayer. And Mr. and Mrs. Taxpayer does not have a magic tree. I've heard things like, well, costs are going up, we should give more. Well, costs are going up for the people that are giving to the city, the taxpayer. I'd just like to have that in balance. Who wouldn't like to give more as a gift? But every taxpayer has the same problem that we have. And that problem is the erosion of the buying power of the dollar. I'd just like to just throw that out there in the interest of financial decisions as opposed to emotional decisions. They're not fun, but I think we ought to keep that in balance.
And I agree with that, but we need to start that back at the time when the budget process starts, including the school department and the library and all of the others that, that we love. We can't do that just to the city budget, which is what we seem to be doing this year again. You know, I mean, if we want to, local roads, we could take money out of local roads and reduce those funds. The problem is that everyone, if you talk to any citizen in the grocery store, they're gonna tell you how horrible the roads in the city of Ellsworth are. And it's because that's a line item that keeps getting cut. And it's not a fair statement to say that the city budget needs to be cut to the bare bones because other budgets are 17, 18% high. And so if we're going to take that attitude, which I agree we should, by the way, in a lot of instances, we need to start from the beginning and not
Totally
here
agree.
at the end of the night.
Totally agree with that comment.
Because we
It's-
can't make up.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, and at some point, I would have to say this, that, you know, this thing is gotten pounded pretty good, and there's been a lot of time spent. And at some point, I'm not saying that we should do this, I'm questioning the process. At some point, should the overall attitude be every department or the total budget can only increase 5%? Or 6%, or what percent can we accept and pass on to the taxpayer? As opposed to this department way up here and this department's way down here. At some point, do we say, okay, look, this year, our goal is to keep the overall rate at 4%. So we have a goal to meet when we're making the wish list. And the department heads have a goal to meet. I'm not saying that's the perfect procedure, I'm just throwing that out there. That there's got to be some sort of constraint and focus on the balance of dollars and needs throughout the city, not just on the municipal part, to speak to you, I mean, everywhere, you know. At one point, okay, last year, let's focus on a 4% increase, let's see where we're at, what we can do, every department, every part of the city, as opposed to these numbers. And I'm not saying these numbers are wrong, what I'm saying is the people we're looking to fund it have the same problem we do. The buying power of the dollar has eroded. Therefore, asking them for more is a pretty tough pill to swallow.
So if I could, just real quickly, I'd just like to kind of comment to that concept, because when we start with the budget process, the city side, the manager side, our ultimate goal is not a figure, our ultimate goal is the least amount of increase that we can sustain and keep services at the level that the citizens of the city of Ellsworth expect. That's the mentality that we go into the budget process with. So when we start with our department heads, you know, everyone talks about this wish list, but our department heads are pretty well ingrained in the concept that that's not going to happen. You're not going to put forward a ridiculous budget that's gonna pass muster. It's not gonna pass the manager's budget. It's gonna get cut right out of the gate. So when we look at the budget, the initial budget request from our department heads, we have built-in increases that we're aware of, operational costs that we have no control over. Some are fuel-related and other types of costs, and then others are employee costs. So contract increases for our union people. We know that those are already built in. So we set those aside, and then we start through the process of all the other line items of areas where can we save money here, can we reduce money here, can we And that's ultimately, that's the process, although we don't set a figure, because setting a figure, we'd have to take all of those built-in costs and say we figured on 5%. We were gonna satisfy, we were gonna shoot for 5%. Well, we figure in all of our costs that we don't control, our fixed operational costs, and our salaries for our union employees that are already negotiated and already figured in, and we're at our 5%, well, we're not gonna necessarily need to make any effort to see where can we possibly cut to actually see some additional savings. So I think the process, although maybe flawed in some ways, and it may, we can tweak this or change that or do this better, I think going into the budget with the mindset that we want the leanest budget, the smallest increase that we can possibly manage to sustain the operations is an appropriate approach. And that's the one that I've taken over the last 3 years when I've started the budget process. Just wanted to give you a little insight into what my thought process is when we start this back in December and January.
I think it's a hope that this coming year, the budget will be in our mind, in the fall, and not when the manager gives us the budget. If we're looking at and working at ways of cutting costs and looking at our finances throughout the year and saying, looking at our leases, looking at our capital improvements, looking at the way that we're paying for things now, and working with the school department and the library to do the same thing, that hopefully it'll be just a little more informative ahead of time, so that by the time we get the budget, there's a little bit more understanding of the document itself and what it consists of and where some of the savings are, and they will be in the manager's budget to begin with. Because, I know in the history of being with the city, and Tammy knows too, that the department heads do that. There are times that they have ideas and they have things that they would like to do, but it becomes a priority of the other things. They don't just give the manager or a budget and say, this is all the things that we would like to have. But it gets to be, we'd love to have this, but these are the things that we have to have this coming year, like the highway department and the building. There's a lot of things that could be done in that building, but they picked the things that they had to have this year. And I think it happens more often than not. And then Glenn has that opportunity too of seeing the budget as a whole. And there are, we've cut some things in this budget. We've found new ways of funding some things and looking at TIF funds and some things like that to reduce the budget from what Glenn gave us. But hopefully next year, we'll have an even better idea of how we're gonna pay for things. And
To comment on that, if I may, Glenn, I think you purged a lot of things from the budget, and I commend you for that. I just think Ellsworth could look at other ways and other processes to improve this. And I keep getting back to, no matter what we do, we've got to turn this bill over to Mr. and Mrs. Ellsworth and say, send the money. And they've got the same problems we have. That's why I'm struggling. And probably always will, because I'm a conservative. But I struggle with these decisions that become emotional. And rightfully so. I'm certainly emotional about certain things, but at some point, it's gonna come down to finances. And I believe Ellsworth can do better.
I think we definitely should take a look at it through this year, and, yeah, absolutely, just because it's done the same way every year, it doesn't.
Right.
so those new
And the
processes-
changes could be wrong, it could be a mistake too, but Ellsworth can do better. And when our bills are up at the city level, Mr. and Mrs. Taxpayers' bills are up. And so the problem we hand them is an even bigger problem, because their heating oil is going up, and so are their taxes, because ours is going up. And it's a tough situation. Admitted that I'm an inexperienced guy. This is my only second budget I've ever sat through. But, boy, to hand the taxpayer the bill, just don't forget that they've got the same problems we've got.
This-
Thank you for listening.
It's further complicated by the valuations. The pandemic was something that accelerated a problem. The valuations I was saying this before the meeting, the home prices still in this city are just off the charts. Homes go on the market and they sell even at valuations that are way above, you couldn't even dream that you could get $250,000 more for a home than you could 2.5 years ago. So that valuation has driven that up. And then when you look at the mill rate has gone down, but the cost taxpayers are paying more because the value of their properties have increased drastically. And you look at the valuations of where we're at compared to where we were 5 years ago, so it gets complicated in terms of how this all comes to pass. The increase, if we cut $1 million out of the budget, then we're looking at a mill rate of about 16.6. It would still be an increase over last year. And $1 million, when you start thinking about, okay, well, let's not give anything to social service agency. Now you eliminate all of that, it was still $900,000 that we would need to cut. And I think, as I said before, in another meeting, I think there's an opportunity for the city that hasn't been here, because the disconnect that existed in the city in terms of the entire budget, there were very much silos of resistance in terms of looking at creative solutions to some of the problems. We have to figure out what we want as a city, and there has to be a recognition that it doesn't just come from tax dollars. And there's an opportunity to consolidate things. But when you have the school that was absolutely a silo for as long, until this year, until Amy stepped in the role, that was off limits. There were no discussions, at least on the time that I've been in this role. And that's half the budget. That's half the mill rate. And so there are opportunities there. That takes dialogue and discussion. It can't happen during this, just a few months. There's got to be a willingness of the council to follow up with that and to make sure there's a process to have those discussions. Because if that doesn't happen, then it starts to fall apart. I think there also has to be that trust to say to the city manager and the superintendent, this is what you're charged with. Do the work, come back. It can't be this, the council doesn't do the work, the city staff does the work. But there has to be that willingness to do that. And I think we have all those pieces in place now for some of those discussions to take place. And then the opportunity to look for grants and how do we fund some of the services that we absolutely need. We can't cut, we could cut roads. I think of my second year on the council, I think that's what we did. We ended up cutting like $700,000 out of the roads budget to bring the mill rate down.
They loved you, didn't they, the citizens?
It's short, so it really is, it's that, what do we want and how do we get there? But you've got to have willing participants to give and take, and to not just hunker down and saying, this is my area, this is what I'm going to stick with, period. It's got to be an open discussion, and it has to start sooner. And I think there's an opportunity, I really do. And unfortunately, this is a year that all the forces are coming together, and no one likes it, and will be criticized, and all of that will take place. Tell me where. What do you want to cut? Do you want to cut, I'm not saying to you, I'm talking about the community. Do you want the police force to be cut in half? Do you want the firefighter force to be cut in half? You want City Hall to be closed, only open a couple days a week? Do you want, what do you want? Where are we going to get $2 million? Do you want the school to not move forward and address some of the issues that have been neglected? What is it? It's not magic. it's tough decisions, but it starts with an understanding of where do we want to head and what are the solutions around it. I don't think just cutting or adding is the solution. I think there are better creative solutions to have happen, but that's going to take some work.
But that's our new process, though. That's what you're talking about. That's the new process that we need to do, and not just look at this budget in March and say we need to cut because it's too much. It's
Well, I think-
talking about the budget throughout the year and understanding it better.
I think, I think everyone needs to start at ground zero and start rethinking, just because it's been done a certain way for 10 years, is there a better way to consider that? Can we do more with less? What can we do that is not hasn't been thought of yet? Okay, nobody's thought of the solution. And I just think that it's a great opportunity. And to speak a little bit about this mill rate thing, maybe I don't get it, but I don't care what the mill rate is, I don't care what the assessment is, I care what the people pay. And maybe I'm wrong in that. Maybe I should be more concerned with. We have an emergency over here?
There was a tick in my hair.
Oh,
In your hair?
No, my hair.
Oh, jeez.
wow.
Sorry, that's for I'm not paying attention.
All right,
Sorry
can
about
you
that.
sit out there for a while?
Have you
No, I think there's
animal
great
control
chances.
No.
Now I have imaginary ticks all
Yeah.
over
I
me.
know, now I'm all itchy and I've got goosebumps.
But
You're all
your
right.
mill rate is
No
up
more.
in your assessment, your value assessments. I've heard that the assessor went up 5%, but when I look at these numbers, it's 7.21% across the board. So, and I'm not picking that apart, but when you have a 7.21% increase in valuation and you have a mill rate increase that we've had, collectively, it's a lot.
But when the mill rate, like it did last year, pretty much stayed flat from the prior year, taxes still went up because of the valuation, and that can't be controlled. What can be controlled is if you keep all the expenses flat, you could still end up finding that you pay more to maintain, otherwise you're cutting into what the community has said they want, and so it does get complicated when we have that spike. Now, I think it's unusual to have the kind of spike in valuations that we've had, the dramatic increase, but, hopefully that will level off and that won't drive the budget.
I'm interested in the amount that is to the right of the equal sign. To the left of the equal sign, you've got valuations, you've got mill rates, and you can pump and switch and all of that, but I'm interested in that number that's to the right of the equal sign. And I'm not saying that I'm just simply saying Ellsworth can do better, we need to think about new ways to do things. Whatever, cut the size of government, do whatever has to be done to make this a better process. I'm done.
As long as the roads get plowed, as long as the buildings get fixed when they're broken, as long as equipment gets replaced when it needs to be, then we can probably do it that way.
That's about 90% of your budget, what you just said.
Where's the school?
Cutting positions, something's gonna get not done.
Can I ask a totally separate, non sequitur question? I'm just comparing this new overall budget front page with the one that you emailed us on the 16th, with the one that I have from the 27th, from the one that I have the 16th. I'm just trying to. And on the one that you gave us today, the public library budget is listed at 542,898, but on the inside, it's 620,798.
Yes, the rest of that comes out of their revenues. Their revenues offset the difference, so the 542 is the city,
The city portion.
the city portion of their,
So they have a budget, and then they have a city appropriation that they're asking for.
their budget is the 620.
I didn't think we were cutting our appropriations by $100,000 compared to last year, but this makes it look like we are.
All right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But we
Where's the-
moved, remember, we,
Where's the-
Moved one of the positions?
the employee benefits have.
Right, we
Yeah,
moved
they
all of their
moved them.
benefits, which is
Employee
$100,000.
benefits moved out.
That's why I said it's
So if you put them
wonky.
back in,
It looked like it was 2% decrease, and it
Okay.
actually isn't because we took all that other stuff
Right.
out. I was just trying to find it in here. Oops.
it's still going, it's still being appropriated, it's just been moved, so.
Into that whole.
Right, it should look like that number plus.
Right.
But speaking of the library, I did notice
But it wasn't like
they
that
left
was-
$15,000 in for the electrical, and I thought we told them they didn't need to have that much because they were part of that solar credit thing.
Or is that their portion?
I need to
'Cause
look
that's the
and see
same as
what
they
their
had last year.
actuals are to
Yeah, I'd
date.
have to look at their actuals also. I didn't look at
They
their.
should have reduced it some, because
It is, and it's 15,000, which is what it was last year, and it was 13,000 in '22. So I just didn't know, I mean, if they don't need 15,000, then we could reduce our appropriation. Yep, see, that's the appropriation that they're asking for. But see the difference in their budget because they took out the other things.
Right, so we took out $83,000 in benefits and put them in the employee benefit line, plus 14,000 in cost of living increases and put in the employee benefits line, so that's
But it only reduced $37,000 because they counted it
$102,000.
as increases.
Okay.
Brings them up to around 640. Change.
But we do need to look at that electricity
Okay.
to see if it should be reduced some, whatever.
And depending on what your thoughts are around next year in fund balances, that's why putting the benefits with the departments makes sense, because if the benefits are underspent, that too goes to a fund balance. And if it's not in there, that fund balance is in the employee benefits, totally separate.
savings, solar savings. Did we capture, last year, I know we captured like 75,000, I thought this year we left some in there. Again.
There's 75,000.
Yeah,
in the solar
75,000.
credits. I mean, other revenues?
Down towards the bottom, under other. Because we haven't reconciled those, I mean, we haven't even had a full year yet, so it's kind of hard to.
For what it's worth, for the community, whoever's listening or watches this, show up in the June meeting or send emails or, I think the council is willing to listen to ideas, but to just say, cut my taxes is not, it offers no direction, no guidance. We're elected to help try to work through this. Ideas are helpful. It's late in the process, but it certainly would be beneficial to hear if there's an idea to raise that. Anything else?
I have one general question, and I think I've asked this before. Why is the finance director not at budget workshops? Why are we leaning on the clerk to do all the work?
She's not there yet. She doesn't understand the budget process. She wasn't here through the first quarter of it, and Tony had taken on that responsibility. She doesn't have the working knowledge of Munis that Tony has to be able to pull up numbers and look things up immediately. And she's focusing on the audit and other equally as important functions of the finance department, and so.
I'm very thankful for everything that Tony does. It just seems that we're spreading her over many departments, and I don't think the finance director is going to learn by not attending. Tony needs to be here, obviously, because she's the kingpin throughout, but the finance director, I would think, should be here. It's a great way to learn.
But after tonight, you're relieved of your duties, huh?
I hope.
Anybody want to have another budget meeting?
No,
That's enough.
no, she called it.
I just want to thank you. Every meeting, you have been there doing all of this work.
And the clickety-doo does.
I will make these adjustments and email these back out to you. That way, if you have something before the June meeting that you see is just incorrect, just let me know.
So can we present this as, this was your budget?
Sure. And if it's wrong, then
All right, we are adjourned. No more budget meetings. Thank you.